Hi, so now that we've gone back and looked at our model a little more closely, we're ready to at least begin coding this. So this is the same project, and I've just made some alterations to it to reflect the changes that we thought of in our model to make a more robust application. The first problem we determined was that with this part that we were creating in the view controller, we weren't doing anything with it. So the idea that we came up with is to add this part to a parts catalog, but we wanted to create the part as an automatically releasing part, or a part with a weak reference. In other words, a reference count initially of 0, so that when we added it to the catalog would take care of the reference to the part. So what we've done is this looks the same, except we're not allocating and initializing the part. We're just calling a method called part with number, name, description, quantity, bin, and reorder level. Now let's look at how we do that, because in our part.h we need a way to create a version of a part without actually allocating memory for the part. We just need to create an auto-releasing part, or a weakly reference part. So we've added a class method, and this kind of pattern here is called a factory pattern. What we're doing is we're creating a part that has a weak reference count. It has a reference count of 0. And then when we add it to the catalog will put a reference count of 1 on it, and so forth. So this is a class method. We can see that by the plus. We return an ID, and then here, instead of init with number, blah, 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 we have part with number. We're not going to call alloc, so no memory is going to be allocated. So it's just going to return this part. So part with number, name, description, quantity, bin, and reorder level. Now let's look at how we implement that. In automatic reference counting, we're just calling through to our self alloc and then init with number and so forth. So we've already got this init method that is a instance method that's going to return a part with a reference count of 1. So wouldn't this method then return part with a reference count of 1? The answer is no. Arc is going to look at this and it's going to deallocate it when we fall out of this method. We used to have a method called auto-releasing pre-arc. And in that, we would create, the auto-releasing method actually marked this class or this object for deletion. Well, Arc, automatic reference counting, is smart enough to know that if we don't use it within this method, it's going to auto-release it anyway. So we're just returning an auto-released version of a part. Now, when we go back to our view controller, what do we do with that auto-release part? Well, we're going to add it to the catalog. So in our parts catalog class, we've got a method called addPart. And this part that we've just created with a reference count of 0 is called addedPart. When we add it to the parts catalog grabs it and gives it a reference count of 1. The next thing we want to do is check if the quantity the user entered is greater than 0. If the quantity is greater than 0, then we want to also add it to our inventory. And we've already got that. Self.inventory, add part, quantity, and bin. And then we've defined 2 methods, each on the part catalog and in inventory, called report. So now we're going to look at our part catalog class. And of course, you can look at this as well. But we've got add part. I've also added delete part, which we'll talk about in the next demo, and then report. So let's look at add part. We've got an NS mutable set that is the wrapper for our catalog, and we've called that listing. And we just lazily instantiate that NS mutable set. Now, a set, NS set, is a listable object. It's a p-listable object. But the unique quality of a set is that if we add something to it, if there's already a set with this, or if an element already has all of the same information, if it is an identical object, it won't add it. A set can only contain one unique object of each kind. So if we try to add another element that is identical to an element that is already there, it's not going to add it. So this is pretty cool for our purpose because we want a catalog to be unique for each part. We don't want two of the same part sitting in our parts catalog. We only want one of each unique part. So for add part, all we have to do is add the part that we pass in, that we had a reference count of 0 in our view controller. We add that part to the listing. And it's self.listing, which is the mutable set. It has a method called addObject, and we add that object, and that is part. And now self.listing puts a reference count of 1 on this element of the set, and each element of the set as it gets passed in. Pretty cool. When we delete a part, we need to find the correct part. So we use a for-in loop. So the for-in construct, and if we just type in Xcode FORIN and hit enter, it gives us the template. Well, the first part of this is a type and an object name, and then the second part is a collection. So it's going to iterate or enumerate through each object in whatever collection that is. So what we want is to enumerate through the set. So we have a bunch of parts. So for the part type called target part in the self.listing set, we enumerate through and we check. We see if the target part number is equal to the string, the part number that we passed in. If it is, we remove that part. Self.listing, remove object with target part. And that's pretty simple. All right, and then the report is just printing out the catalog information. And you can look at this. It's a bunch of printf statements and just formatted nicely. Okay. So now let's look at inventory because we know there's some changes there. This has not changed except I've added a header for the report method. But now remember what we said about inventory. We wanted inventory to still be a mutable dictionary. But instead of a mutable dictionary of arrays, we wanted it to be a mutable dictionary of sets of arrays, where each bin actually pointed to a set, and then within that set there would be part number 1, part number 2, part number 3, and the information for each of those. So we need to lazily instantiate bins as we did before. And then in the add part, we need to set up the array for the part, and this we're calling part info, which is an array with the objects of the part number and the quantity. And then we need to check if the set for this bin already exists. If it already exists, we just get that set. So this is the bin set. It's an NS mutable set, as we can see. And then we get the object for the key, pbin. Now, if it already exists, all we need to do is add the array to that set. So bin set add object part info. But if it doesn't already exist, we need to create a set and then add the part info into that new set. So the bin set is an NS mutable set, alloc, with objects, part info, and this is the array. And then set that bin as the bin set for the key pbin into the mutable dictionary that owns it. Okay, now how do we know if bin set exists? Well, this declaration of bin set is returning self.bin's object for key. Now, if that object does not exist for that key, then bin set is going to be nil. And when we do if bin set, what that really expands to is if bin set equal nil. So this is a short form of that, which I like better. It just says if there's a bin set, do this, otherwise do this. Okay, so now when we run our application, we've got a little bit better model. So let's do a couple of things here. Let's add a part. We'll say PN001 for part number, and let's call it part 1. And the description will just say first part. That's kind of nice. And the quantity, initially, let's not add this to inventory. So we'll put no quantity, but we'll set a reorder quantity of, say, 15. And the bin is going to be parts room 0023, just randomly. Okay, and when we click OK, we will see that we have the parts list, and this is printed from the catalog. So we have part number 001, and we have all the correct information. Because there was no quantity here, the inventory report is clear. So now let's add a new part. So PN002, the name, part 2. The description could be second part. See, I'm really imaginative today. This one we're going to add to inventory. In other words, I order it with initial quantity of 100. And when it goes down to 10 parts, I want to reorder it. And then let's put this in parts room 0023. Okay, so we click done. Okay, now we can see we have two parts. We have PN002, PN001. Sets are unordered. These could be in any order at all. We really don't care. But we can sort these if we want, and I'll show you how to do that as our application evolves. However, our inventory report now shows a part in bin PR0023, and the part number is so forth, and the quantity is 100. We click again, new part. Now let's see, PN003, and again we'll just say part 3, third part for the description. Let's get 200 of those, and a reorder quantity of 20, just 10%. And let's put that in a different bin. So let's call this assembly line 0015, just randomly. Okay, so now in our inventory report, we have two bins. We have AL0015 and PR0023, and we can see the parts in each one. Okay, now let's make sure that we can have more than one part kind in a bin. So let's go back to 0023 and add a new part. So part number 004, part for fourth part, and let's get 150 initially with a reorder quantity of 10%. And then remember, we're going to add this into PR0023. So PR0023. Now, when we add this, this should be in bin PR0023. And we can see that we have now two parts in PR0023. We have PN004 and PN002 with the right quantities for each. Okay, so now we have a model that we can work with. And we can see that our part list now has 4, 2, 1, and 3. Again, there's no ordering implied on a set at all. And then our inventory report is working fine. Okay, so going forward, we're going to use this model and begin developing our user interface. The next thing we want to do, though, demo 2, is to hook up that delete method from the catalog. And if we want to trap and ask the user if they want to delete it from inventory or just delete it from the catalog. Thank you very much.